So today's lecture will be an introduction to original speech events. For questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I cannot access them while I'm sharing my screen, so feel free whenever anything comes up or you think of anything, please put it in the chat and I'll address everybody's questions at the end. All right, so let's get into it. So the first thing you might be wondering is, why should you do an original event? Original events are one category of speech events. As you may have seen in the intro to speech lecture yesterday, there are several main categories. There are original events, there are interpretation events, and there are limited prep events. So original events are basically where you write your own speech. The script is up to you. The topic is up to you. And so the benefits of doing this category of events is that it gives you the opportunity to be creative with topics, themes, examples, and stories. It's also a great way to improve your writing skills. You also develop a personal connection to your speech because, of course, you are the one creating it. You can also adapt and edit your script throughout the season. So if you think of any better ideas that you can add to your script, or maybe if you are going through a tournament season and you realize that certain aspects of your script are not working out for you, you can always adapt it and change it. And finally, no two speeches are exactly alike. And so that's between competitors and also between yourselves. So every year you can come up with an entirely new speech, and it's always fun to kind of put your own spin on new topics. So there are four main original events. The first one, kind of like the token original event, is original oratory, or OO. And this is the event that I competed in when I was in high school. This is a 10-minute speech on a topic of your choice. It must be an original composition, so you must write the entire script. However, you are allowed to cite sources. In fact, you are highly encouraged to cite sources, and you are allowed to quote a limited number of words. Generally, it's about 150 words. The topics are usually abstract, so these are usually societal issues and major, like, big problems in society that can be addressed in a nuanced way in a 10-minute speech. Like I said, it focuses on a problem in society and potential solutions for that problem, and these solutions generally also tend to be abstract. Original oratory speeches also usually tie in a personal story or personal significance. The second original event is original advocacy, or OA. OA is similar to OO, except advocacy topics tend to be more concrete as opposed to general abstract topics with OO. Advocacy topics tend to be public policy issues, and the main reason why your topic needs to be concrete is that you are required to come up with a legislative solution to the problem, kind of like proposing your own law or proposing your own bill, and you will be bringing that up in the towards the end of your speech. And this is what the main thing that distinguishes OA from OO. And this is a California only event, so you'll be able to compete in it at state qualifiers in states, but not at the NSDA level. The third original event is original prose and poetry, or OPP. This is one of the most creative events that is available to you. Both the topic and the style of presentation are up to you, the speaker. So this is essentially very similar to an interpretation performance. So just like dramatic interpretation or humorous interpretation, except you are the one writing the script. Speeches can be dramatic, humorous, satirical, inspirational. It's up to you. This is also a California-only event, so you can compete in it at states, but not at nationals. And this is a really awesome event for those of you who are creative writers who have always wanted to share your work with others, and it gives you this really unique, really cool opportunity to present it. The fourth and final original event is called expository speaking. This is very different from any other speech event in that you are allowed and encouraged to use audio and visual aids. So this includes very often an easel with posters. You can also get really creative with this. You can do your own, like, for example, chemistry experiments if you're into that, and if that's the topic of your speech. If you play an instrument and your speech happens to be about the history of rock and roll or something like that, you can bring your instrument and you can play it. The sky's the limit in this category. The basic premise of this is that the purpose of this event is to inform, not necessarily to persuade. So you have 10 minutes to speak about a nonfiction, a factual topic. You're allowed to dress up if you want. The only catch is that the time that you take to set up your props is counted in your 10 minutes of speaking time. So you should be able to be really organized with how you set up your props. This is one of the most time-consuming events to prepare, and you'll have to carry around your easel and posters with you if you do this at a tournament. One important thing to note is that expository speeches do not have to be about an academic subject. You have, of course, your traditional academic subjects, but you can also delve into something that is not normally taught in a classroom that you're really passionate about. This is also a California-only event, so it tends to not be offered at some invitationals, but it is offered at NSDA. It's called informative speaking at the national level. Okay, so one of the most important and one of the most difficult things about original events is that the topic is up to you. So there's no, when you look at the rules of any of these events, there's no strict guidelines as to what your topic should be about. And so that leaves you a lot of creative freedom, but that also can make it very challenging. Here are some basic do's and don'ts of choosing a topic that I have come to realize in my 3 years of doing original oratory. And this is definitely applicable to all 4 events. And another disclaimer, this is by no means a very definitive list of do's and don'ts. There are more that you might realize, and in addition, you don't feel like a topic can't work. There's always ways to adapt your topics to make them better for speech events. So let's go through the do's first. So do choose a topic that you relate to strongly or are passionate about. So you're going to be spending a lot of time writing and researching your topic, and so you definitely don't want to do something that you don't know a lot about, or you're not familiar with, or that you're not passionate about. You also want to choose a topic that is nuanced. So in essence, something that maybe hasn't been covered before in a speech, or maybe has been covered before but not in a specific angle that you're taking. And you also want to choose a topic that can be expanded upon with research. So this means, like, if you're really into highly specific topics, be careful with that, because again, you're going to be writing a 10-minute speech about this, and research is a really big part of original events. So make sure that the topic is something that you can research and that you can write about and fill time with. Finally, choose a topic that makes you feel excited when you think about it. A really good topic is something that will get you thinking and will keep you thinking constantly during the writing process. And you definitely don't want to select a topic that you don't have fun writing about. So then for the don'ts, so don't choose a topic that is too broad or is overly general, vague, or unclear. So there are plenty of really great topics out there that are very broad, and so like some social issues are very encompass a wide array of topics and angles, and a good thing to be aware of is that you have a 10-minute block to speak about this topic. So a really good approach for these kinds of more general issues is to take a specific angle on that topic, or put a put a unique spin on that topic. You also don't want to do topics that are overdone or that everyone kind of knows already. So for example, like we should all be more like positive, like that is something that, you know, we're all aware of. But one way you could turn that into a good oratory topic is to think about how how positivity is beneficial in different aspects of life, and come up with real world examples that can be applied to that. So in general, with original event topics, you can do almost any topic, but you want to make sure that the speech that you're giving is something that's interesting and original for people to listen to. Third point, don't choose a topic that is inappropriate for an academic competitive setting. This is pretty self-explanatory. When you're writing your speech, you're representing yourself. And so you want to definitely choose a topic that you're comfortable speaking about and that your audience will be comfortable listening to. Fourth, don't choose a topic that relates only to a high school or teenage audience. So this is one that I'm kind of guilty of. When we're, you know, in high school, it's very easy to get caught up in issues that affect only us. For example, like competitiveness or thinking too much about your future and things like that. Those are topics that are viable, that you can use, but again, you need to be aware of your audience. So while your competitors are also going to be fellow high school students, fellow teenagers, your judges are most often going to be parents, are going to be adults. And so you want to find a topic that can relate to everyone and that everyone can find interesting, not just your competitors, not just you. So this is a really challenging thing, can be a really challenging thing sometimes. And there's no harm in picking a topic that you have experienced as a teenager, but you want to apply it to a more general sense, if that makes sense. Finally, don't choose a topic that you find boring to write about. This again goes back to you want to pick a topic that you care about, that you're passionate about, that you relate to. If you're not having a good time writing your speech, it might be a good indication that you should maybe switch up your topic. So yeah, there's some basic do's and don'ts. All right. So structuring your speech, this is mainly a thing for OO and OA. OPP is a little bit different, but for original events, it helps to have a structure in mind when you're writing it, especially when you're in the early brainstorming phase. Writing a speech is similar to writing an essay. You want to have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs of sorts, and a conclusion. So for OO and OA, this generally tends to be problem, cause, solution. So to elaborate on that a little bit, you want to talk about what your problem is, make sure you adequately address it so that the audience is aware of the issue that you're trying to tackle in your speech. And then the causes of that problem. So this can have a really broad scope. This can be like global causes, this can be individual causes, societal mindsets, things like that. For OA, these causes can be tend to be more concrete. So these can be pinpointed to specific events that have happened, specific policies that have been passed. And then your third body paragraph is your solution. So for OO, like I said before, this tends to be an abstract solution, but you definitely, so abstract does not just mean fluff. You can be abstract, and you can also cite sources and be clear and methodical in your explanation. For expository, the body paragraph content is mainly up to you. You don't even have to follow the body paragraph format for an expository speech because it's a little bit different from OO and OA. in that you are addressing all of the facets of a topic that you can cover in your 10 minutes. So the organization of your speech is more up to you. So you are welcome to kind of come up with your own sort of structure, but you should have one in mind when you're writing it. Original prose and poetry is the most flexible one. The structure, again, an OPP, you could literally write a story and perform it. You could write a poem and perform it. There's no defined structure for OPP, but there should definitely be a clear storyline, and the audience should be able to follow your speech. And here's a little graphic on the left that I created. I'll talk about the speech triangle a little bit more later, but basically, yeah, your introduction, problem, cause, solution, and you should always be tying everything back to your main theme. Make sure that your audience is constantly aware of the theme in your speech. You always want to be cycling back to that theme to make your speech easier to follow. Okay. So I'm ready to start writing. Now what? So you have a topic. What comes next? So like I said, you want to start with an outline. This can be the intro, 3 body paragraphs, conclusion that I had mentioned before. For OPP, the creative process might be a little bit different, but you should definitely be aware of what you're about to get yourself into. One thing that I noticed when I was writing my original oratory speeches is that the best ideas would come to me at random times. So make sure you save those ideas. Give yourself enough time to think, and the best ideas are the ones that come to you like in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, when you're just going about your day. Make sure you note those ideas down, and then you want to and if you're having trouble coming up with ideas, you can always browse the internet. So a good place to start are informational videos, news sites. If you're someone who likes to scroll through the news, that can be a place for you to start. Informational videos like those random like little clips on YouTube about random topics, those are good sources of inspiration. And whenever you come across something that you think you might want to refer back to later, make sure you copy the URL and save it, so that if you want to return to that source, you can, and later when you're creating your script, you can cite your sources. And citations are important in the actual body of your speech, so you want to mention where you got your information from, partially because that's a common academic practice that you should do, and also because it helps build credibility. For original prose and poetry, a good place to find inspiration is to watch interpretation performances and read short stories. So there are a lot of videos that the National Speech and Debate Association has posted of interpretation performances. So those are good places to look for inspiration. And then again, short stories. Obviously, you're not going to be able to present an entire novel in a 10-minute time span, but a short story is it's a good way to practice getting an entire plot in a shorter frame of time. Also, don't wait until the last minute to start. Give yourself several weeks before the tournament to write. I would say at least like a month or 2 is how long the writing process takes. If you're more experienced, you might be able to write speeches quicker. But early in your speech and debate your career, you want to make sure you give yourself enough time, because you're also going to have to memorize your performance or memorize your script. And so it's definitely not fun to be cramming your speech into your memory the night before the tournament. For research, here are some of the sources that I've found helpful. The Pew Research Center is a think tank that has a lot of really cool and interesting statistics and results from surveys that you can utilize in your speech. TED Talks are really, really great. Sometimes one of the best things you can do for yourself is just like look for TED Talks in an area that you're interested in and just watch them and look for quotes. TED Ed, so TED Ed creates these short 3 to 4 minute videos about random topics. And so those are really good sources for random trivia tidbits and information. That I found that really helpful. Psychology Today is another really good source for if your OO is addressing like a specific mindset that people have. And then another source is different reputable news sources. So the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and NPR. They tend to have lots of different interesting articles and ideas that you can draw from. If you are looking for academic journals and academic articles, you can always search Google Scholar and district or school-sponsored databases. And finally, always make sure you verify the credibility of your sources. So yeah, make sure you are going and looking at looking at the credentials of the author, and making sure that everything that you cite is a verifiable source. So spicing up your script. In the Intro to Speech lecture yesterday, Annie talked about ethos, logos, and pathos, which are the 3 main modes of persuasion. You want to incorporate that into your speech. So here's like a list of things you can weave into your script. Quotes are really good. Keep in mind that the amount of words that you can quote is limited. But those are a really good way of getting points across. Statistics. Statistics goes back to logos or logical persuasion. There are people in your audience who are going to be more geared towards logical arguments, and so having statistics to support and back up your cause is always good. Personal anecdotes, these are always fun to weave into your speech. They're really good to start out original oratories. They can also be really powerful in the climax of the speech. And so if you have like a funny personal story about something that happened to you, that's really good to put into your introduction. If you have like a really sad personal story that you're comfortable sharing with an audience, the climax, so right before your solution, is a really good place to put it. Extended metaphors are always interesting. So by that, I mean, for example, if you're talking about something in your introduction, kind of weaving that idea throughout the rest of your speech. So, for example, my senior year, I did a speech about how society views kindness as more of a weakness than a strength. And so in my introduction, I talked about Harry Potter and how Hufflepuff is viewed as like the most boring house or the weakest house. And so I kind of would weave in the metaphor of Hufflepuff and Harry Potter throughout my speech, and that kind of put this unique spin on it that I enjoyed presenting, and that a lot of people could understand and relate to. Other things, pop culture, current events, and human interest stories. So yeah, these are things you can find in the news, in videos online. And then psychological studies. This is another thing that helps you build your logical appeal. And then modern day and historical examples. So when you're performing your original piece, it's really important to be aware of how you're presenting. So for all speech events, you're required to commit your script to memory. So you want to have your speech really well memorized. The speech triangle is basically, if you were at the Intro to Speech lecture yesterday and you watched the video of the national finalist performing, you can remember that she started in the center of the stage and then moved around, so like would move to the left and then move to the center and then move to the right. So that is called the speech triangle. It's the idea of kind of moving around to different parts of the stage for different points, because especially when you don't have a podium, it's a little bit weird to just be standing in the same spot the whole time. And so you want to kind of block out how you're going to move around. So the way I would traditionally do it is I would start my introduction in the middle of the stage, in the middle of the classroom, and then move to one side for the problem, the middle for the cause, to the other side, solution, and then end in the middle again for your conclusion. But different people do the speech triangle in different ways. So it's up to you and your personal style of speaking. Hand gestures, so more experienced speakers tend to have this come to them more naturally, but one thing that I used to do is kind of write my hand gestures into my script and practice them a lot. And so you want them to look natural, and so practicing can help with that. Obviously you don't want to overdo it, but hand gestures can help you accentuate your points. Vocal inflection, so changes in pitch, changes in speed to suit whatever you're talking about in the moment. Facial expressions are really important as well, and your tone and body language. So if you're talking about a really serious point, you want that to come across in your tone. If you're making a joke or telling a funny story, it's really important to convey that in your tone and body language as well. All right, so I saw a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to address those now. All right. So let's see. First question, do the bills you create in OA ever leave the room and get considered at a legislative level? That's a really good question. You would have to act on that yourself. If you're really, really passionate about a piece of legislation you create, I'm sure there are processes you can go about to get them recognized. But that would kind of be on you. It's the event OA is more of like a theoretical, like you're pretending that you're creating legislation, but if you find yourself to be really passionate about it, you totally can act on it. What is DIHI and POI? Oh yeah, dramatic. Yes, this is the answer. Dramatic, humorous, and program oral interpretation. These are the interpretation events where you perform a script. Yeah. Okay. Do you ever write a second speech with a different topic in the same year? You totally can. If you find that your speech for the fall semester isn't working out great for you, if you've been getting back your judges' comments and you're seeing some recurring themes that your script isn't really working out, then you're definitely welcome to write a new speech. Yeah, don't be afraid to start from scratch or make heavy edits to your original script. Yeah, don't switch speeches in a tournament. This is brought up in the chat. Yeah, you can't switch your speech in a tournament. You have to stick to the same speech in a tournament. Do most people stick with one speech for the whole year? Most people do, but it's possible to change it. But in general, people stick with the same speech. And the benefit to that is you can develop your script more. When speeches are first written, they tend to be a bit rough in terms of like the composition and your ability to perform it. And so performing the same speech like over and over again, you get better at it and you're better able to edit your script and you know what you need to improve. So that's the benefit. A comment about the Harry Potter houses. Yeah, so I had a lot of fun writing that speech. I'll talk about that about my experience with that a little bit more. So I mentioned earlier that you don't want to pick a topic that's like really generic or really cliche, and like a lot of people view like be kind to others as like a very general and very cliche topic. And the way I kind of got around that was that I talked about my thesis was that kindness is viewed more of like a weakness than a strength. So, like strong people are expected to be like boisterous or like or harsh or like tough. And so I kind of tied that to some global examples of how kindness is beneficial. I used the Harry Potter example. So that was a lot of fun to write. So yeah, there are a lot of really good, I can talk more about some examples of good speeches. Um, so like at nationals, there have been some interesting topics. There was a speech about toxic masculinity a couple of years ago. There was a speech that I really liked called "Off Balance on Purpose." That was about how like we tend to always want to go to the middle ground, whereas it may be sometimes better to pick one side over the other in very complex issues. So yeah, topics can be like specific social issues, like you can focus on the specific social issue, or you can take like a very specific idea, like a way of thinking, so like binary thinking, or the idea of second chances, and then apply that idea, that way of thinking, that flawed way of thinking, to a lot of different like examples in society and in history, and that tends to work really well also. And Luca, if you want to add anything, you totally can.
Yeah, sure. So, uh, I only did oratory my senior year, and one of the things that I really like to emphasize as a coach when it comes to oratory is you could be incredibly creative. And so don't be afraid to go outside the box. Do something that someone may not like. People speak based on like formulaic, like this is the problem, the cause, and the solution. But my basic philosophy with OO is that the entire point of the event is to be creative and have structure, but be free and feel comfortable to do whatever you want to do in a unique way. And then one other thing about oratory is that the most important part of the event is telling a story that's genuine to you. If you find that you have a story that you want to tell, it doesn't matter how small it is, it's a platform to tell it. But um, basically, just like that's the main thing about OO. The other thing is that uh, one of the things I've noticed when I competed with it at state and nationals was that a lot of people build generic pieces around these generic topics. And even if they're very well written, it doesn't feel genuine when it comes to being someone who's watching these speeches. So please don't just choose a generic topic because you feel like you can write a good speech about it, because then it won't be meaningful to you. And that's the most important part of OO. Like, as high school students, you can't really ever talk for 10 minutes in a professional setting and have adults forced to listen to you. Original Speeches is the only event where you can talk for 10 minutes about anything you want, about anything that annoys you, and a parent has to listen. And an adult has to hear your arguments and listen to them and take them seriously. So, just giving you a word of caution. If you want to do OO or advocacy, only do it if you have genuine passion about this specific issue. Okay?
Yeah, that's a super good point. Yeah, this is your opportunity to talk about what you care about. Um, yeah, don't write a speech just for the sake of writing a speech. You want to have that connection with your topic. Yeah.
Oh, and then one more thing. There's like this expectation of personal examples. You don't need one. A lot of times people fake one or make up a disingenuous one or use a small one to feel like they have to check off a box. Because historically, when it comes to how the speeches are structured, in the third part of it, with the solution, you bring up a personal story. And the issue there is a lot of times people do personal stories that seem very minor, or they blow minor personal stories out of proportion in order to, check off the box and use emotional appeal. Don't do that unless the personal story you would reference is meaningful to you and you want to share it, share it. But if not, don't. There's no expectation to share a personal story if you don't want to, or you don't have one you feel like is meaningful enough to tell.
Definitely. Yeah. So all these points that I brought up for things that you can include, don't feel like you have to include these things and check off things on a checklist. Include them if they feel natural to you and they flow with your speech and it makes sense to you. So these are just mostly ideas to get you thinking for when you write your speech. All right, any other questions, thoughts, or concerns?
I have a question.
Yeah, for sure. Go
Oh
ahead.
yeah. So there was a question in the chat about, can you ask the audience questions? You can ask them rhetorical questions. And it's a totally cool utilization tactic, but don't expect a response. Only ask questions if they're rhetorical. Also, if they have a humorous component, do that. But if you want to use humor in your speech, work on timing, and make sure you like time it so the audience laughs and it doesn't feel rushed. In my speech, my senior year, my opening intro was a joke about how clumsy and awkward I am. And half the time I accidentally didn't leave room to laugh. And the only reason it worked is because people were like, oh, he's clumsy and awkward, and forgot to leave room for us to laugh. But like a lot of times, if you try to joke, but you don't have the timing down, it like significantly hurts you. So just like humor is a good tool to utilize, and rhetorical questions are a way to utilize that humor, but only do that if you figure out the timing. Does that answer your question, Kessler? I'll assume that does. You cite the sources verbally. So you're like, according to this study, blank, right? And you have to have a verbal citation like you would have an in-text citation in an essay you write. So like not an in-text citation like a parenthetical citation, but you have to bring up the evidence in the speech.
Could you talk about other topics you have done in the past?
Yeah. So me personally, or in general? Me personally. Okay. So I'll talk about some of my challenges with selecting topics. So my sophomore year, the very first OO I did was about recycling. And so you can see, based on the presentation I just gave, you can see why that's problematic, because recycling is more suited to be an original advocacy topic, right? Like creating like a recycling policy. And so it was something I was really, really passionate about, right? But OO wasn't the right event for that. It's usually and generally like it's pretty easy to tell like which topics are abstract and which topics are more concrete. And if it's a concrete topic, go for original advocacy. So then after that, I wrote a speech about how society is obsessed with competition. And so that was a topic that I also felt strongly about. But the challenge with that is, as I mentioned before, it's one of those topics that is more relatable to a teenage or high school audience than it is to an adult audience. Like in a similar way, my junior year, I gave a speech about how we are obsessed with the concept of our future selves. And so one thing like I wish I had done is like incorporate more examples that don't necessarily relate to how like teenagers view how teenagers view their future selves, but how people in general are concerned with how their future self will turn out. So, and then my senior year, I did the speech about kindness. And so that was when I finally felt like I had, to an extent, honed down my ability to select a topic. So hopefully through me explaining the challenges I had with topics in the past, that kind of helped you guys realize that choosing a topic is not as easy as it seems, and having a topic that is not ideal will sometimes like be difficult, and so yeah, that has been my experience in the past with that. Yeah.
And I can talk about my own personal topic selection. So I was never, I like, as a competitor before my senior year, I was primarily a debater, and I was just like reading articles for research. And I have high function autism / Asperger's, and I've kind of wanted to talk about that in a speech, but I wasn't sure if I was going to. And then I was like reading some articles. I saw an article from like BBC that talked about how the Maori language, which is a Aboriginal language in Australia, changed the word from like used a word meaning his or her time and space, Taki Watanga, and change it to mean the word for autism, because each person with autism has their own unique time and place. And that basically inspired me to write an entire OO centered around the vehicle of Taki Watanga. And so I basically did a very broad speech based on my own personal experiences. And the solution was like self-advocacy and recognizing other people's voices. And it came to me really naturally because I had a eureka moment where I just like read this article and everything flowed together, and it really helped me create my own speech. And I went meta with it, and I talked about how in the solution speech and debate really helped me. And the issue there was I was so creative outside the box that when I competed at the state tournament, I got incredibly inconsistent ranks from my judges because they would either really, really like the creativity or dislike that I wasn't following the norms. And so when I got to the semifinal round, every single other person was following the norms of what an OO is and fit the cookie cutter mold. And because I was outside the box, I got really poor ranks and the judges didn't really understand it. But the thing was, I was proud of what I had done and the fact that like I talked about something that was meaningful to me. And I think to do platform speaking, you have to be proud of your speech before you're proud of the competitive success that comes from your speech, whether or not it's a lot or a little. You have to be proud of the words you said. Because in the end, like 5-6 years down the road, no one's going to remember the trophies you won. You're not going to remember the trophies you won. They're not going to matter to you, but you're going to be proud of the words you said. I say that as I accidentally just realized I have all my trophies behind me. That's really awkward. I'm sorry. But like, that's what it all comes down to, and that's why I think platform speaking is really important. Sorry, I just went on a tangent. My apologies. And you'll notice this year that I do that all the time. I'll tell some obscure story, and it will take like 10 minutes, but there's always some lesson there, hopefully. I don't know.
There always is. Lucas' tangents are always very well said.
But okay, now I see Hanny is asking about visual aids with expository. Slideshows aren't allowed. You basically have to like maneuver it so the visual aids are in view on the camera. I can send you links to the 2020 NSDA final round for expository so you can see how they were able to manage it in a digital setting, because I haven't seen them.